Hello everyone. In continuation with the previous video regarding the superior mesenteric artery and celiac trunk, we are going to deal with inferior mesenteric artery today. And these three arteries forms the major blood supply of abdomen. So before entering in detail, let me give you a quick recap. So here the celiac trunk arises at the level of T12 and L1 vertebra, and then comes the superior mesenteric artery which arises at the L1 vertebra level. And this inferior mesenteric artery arises from the L3 vertebra level, and all these three branches arises from the front of the abdominal aorta, and this abdominal aorta gets bifurcated as common iliac artery at L4 vertebral level. So as I had mentioned, today we are going to deal with the inferior mesenteric artery in detail, and this artery is also called as artery of hindgut. And this artery arises in front of the abdominal aorta behind the third part of duodenum, and it arises at the L3 vertebra level, which is almost 2 to 4 centimeter above the bifurcation of aorta. So here is the bifurcation of aorta, and if we are measuring the distance between this inferior mesenteric artery and this bifurcation, it would be around 3 to 4 centimeter. So here now regarding the course and termination of inferior mesenteric artery. So this inferior mesenteric artery, which is arising at the L3 vertebra level, it runs downwards and mainly towards the left, and it crosses the common iliac artery like this. And finally, this inferior mesenteric artery, and it continues downwards as superior rectal artery. So now let's see regarding the part supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery. Mainly it supplies 1/3 of the transverse colon. We all know up to this part of 2/3 of the transverse colon, it is supplied by inferior mesenteric artery. So here 1/3 is supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery, and from there we are having descending colon, and this area is also supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery. And here comes the sigmoid colon, and then comes our rectum, and it supplies up to the anal canal, where we will be having the anal valve. So if you have any doubt regarding the anatomical structure of anal canal, you can check out the link in our channel. So this is the anal valve, and up to that we can see the blood supply through the inferior mesenteric artery. So as I had told, these are all the parts supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery: 1/3 of the transverse colon, then descending colon, then sigmoid colon, rectum, and up to anal canal, and mainly up to the anal valve. Now regarding the branches of inferior mesenteric artery. So just assume this as inferior mesenteric artery, and first branch is left colic artery, and the next branch is sigmoid arteries, which were multiple in number. And as I had told already that this inferior mesenteric artery continues as superior rectal artery. So now let's see regarding the branches in particular. So we all know that the inferior mesenteric artery arises from the L3 vertebra level, from the front of the abdominal aorta, and from this inferior mesenteric artery there arises the first branch, that is left colic artery, and here it will be having two different branches. One is ascending and another one is descending, and this ascending branch enters into the transverse mesocolon, and finally it anastomoses with middle colic artery, which is a branch of superior mesenteric artery. This we had already discussed when we were seeing regarding the superior mesenteric artery in detail. And this descending branch gets anastomosed with the sigmoid arteries, which will be the second branch of inferior mesenteric artery, and it supplies the transverse colon and the descending colon. So here comes the left colic artery, and it gives two branches. One is ascending, another one is descending. Ascending gets anastomosed with the middle colic artery arising from the superior mesenteric artery, and the descending branch gets anastomosed with the next branch of inferior mesenteric artery, that is sigmoid arteries. So next comes our sigmoid arteries next to the left colic artery, and these were 2 to 5 in number, like multiple of arteries will be here, and this and this upper sigmoid arteries gets anastomosed with the descending branch of left colic artery, and the lower part of sigmoid arteries gets anastomosed with the continuation of inferior mesenteric artery, that is none other than superior rectal artery. So regarding the sigmoid artery, they will be 2 to 4 in number, and the upper arteries gets anastomosed with the left colic artery, and the lowermost sigmoid arteries gets anastomosed with the superior rectal artery, which is none other than the continuation of inferior mesenteric artery. So now regarding the superior rectal artery, which is none other than the continuation of inferior mesenteric artery, and it descends in the sigmoid mesocolon, and it reaches the rectum like this, and it divides into right and left branch, and finally it gets anastomosed with each other, and this is how it happened. And it is seen in the lower part of rectum, and it gets communicated with the middle and inferior rectal artery in the submucosa of anal canal. So it's regarding the superior rectal artery, which is a continuation of inferior mesenteric artery, and it enters the sigmoid mesocolon and it divides into the right artery and left artery, and finally in the lower part of the rectum it gets anastomosed and form a loop of blood vessels, and it also freely communicates with the middle rectal artery and inferior rectal artery. And the anastomosis between the arteries forms the marginal artery, which is an arterial arcade, and it is also called as vasa recta. And this anastomosis is mainly between the branches of superior mesenteric artery and inferior mesenteric artery, and this marginal artery was described by Van Haller. So this is the inferior mesenteric artery, and from there arises the left colic artery and two branches, ascending branch and descending branch. Ascending branch gets anastomosed with the middle colic artery, and this descending branch gets anastomosed with the uppermost arteries of sigmoid artery. And then comes our second artery, that is sigmoid artery, which were multiple in number. You can see here, and this uppermost part of like here the upper arteries gets anastomosed with the descending branch of left colic artery, and lower part gets anastomosed with the continuation of inferior mesenteric artery, that is none other than superior rectal artery. And finally the superior rectal artery divides into right and left when it is crossing the rectum, and finally in the end of the rectum they get an arterial loop like structure. So all this anastomosis forms the arterial arcade, which is none other than the marginal artery. So this is all regarding the inferior mesenteric artery. And if you have any doubts regarding this, or if you have any suggestions for the topics to be discussed, just comment below. And thank you so much. Happy learning.